For my left-hand side, what I'd like to do is I'm going to have a flap that comes down from the top. This was cut to the size, so 8.5 by 11, and I just went ahead and did a score line at 1 inch. The same thing for the one that will come up from the bottom, to give it enough space to adhere down securely. And once those are adhered down, I'm going to take this piece of floral paper, really pretty paper, and we can cover up the screw for the brad at the front that's holding that, that's going to hold it shut, and also hide those flaps there. So let's get started on these flaps. What I want to do first is I'd like to add some distressing to the edges. So I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to go around them, and I'm going to do that to both of these. I'll then take some distress ink. I'll probably will use the Vintage Photo and go around the edges. And I'll do that to both of these flaps. So I have both of those edges distressed. Really like the way they look, and I ran the Vintage Photo around the edges. And I think I'll also run them along the inside edges, which I hadn't done yet, to make sure that there's some nice color going on there as well. And then once that is done, I am going to take my blending brush and some probably going to use a little Vintage Photo, a little tea dye, and or a little antique linen distress ink, and just distress up the panels themselves, especially along the edges of the inside on each side, just to make sure that once I put an image there, that anything that isn't covered by the image looks vintage and aged. Okay, so I got my panels with the ink and everything the way I'd like it. So now I'm going to go ahead and start adhering those down, and just going to use a combination of the two-sided, the double-sided tape adhesive and a little bit of glue. And for the glue, I'm just going to go along, make sure there's some coverage on there, especially along the edges where the tape maybe isn't as prominent. And let's get this first one stuck in place. All I'm going to do is line up that edge to the top edge here. And I use my fingers to help guide that into place. And that's the beauty of having the glue there, is it does give you a little bit of wiggle room in case you realize that it's not exactly aligned or exactly where you'd like it. So it just allows you to wiggle that into place, but that there looks good. Press that down there, press that down there. So the first one's in place. Now I can go ahead and get my bottom one to come up. And I think this is the side I actually want showing. So I'll go ahead and get the tape on the outside. Put a little extra there. Get some glue. Especially along those edges. You get any glue on the mat, easy enough to clean up. Just run your finger over it and get rid of it. Now we'll align this one coming up from the bottom, right along that edge. That looks good. Press that one down into place. so that we'll have that one coming. That looks great. Then it's just a matter of getting our paper over, and the paper is covering up most of that, which is good, but want to make sure that we have some color on the sides before putting that down. So I'm just quickly going to take and just get a little bit of color there. I just like, to make sure the things kind of blend in and don't obviously stick out as, a color that brings attention to the fact that there's a little space there. That's perfect. That looks good. All right, so with that done, I will go ahead and get the paper put into place. Goes that way, and get my tape on it. Get a little bit of glue down there, and we'll be all set. Okay, so that is in place. We have our panels that will flap up and down. We'll get those decorated in a bit. I'd like to get the panels over on this side done now. And for those, I have 2 pieces of the 110-pound craft cardstock cut. And I could do the same thing and have them come up and down. Or I also thought about putting about a 1/2 inch on there, score, and having them come in from either side and fold in, which would be a little bit different than how they are there. So I think that's actually what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna go ahead and score these each at a 1/2 inch from the side, and then go ahead and distress the edges, run some ink, get some ink on the cardstock itself, and I'll show you how that looks. Okay, so we now have the other side of flaps done, and I really like the way they are. We have those that open up like that, and I did put the paper down to cover up where the flaps are adhered as well. You can have them fold over either way. And you also, the more you go ahead and burnish those lines, the more they'll stick down. But so now we have most of the inside of our journal put together with our flaps, and probably put some pockets and stuff over there. Now, you can also do something with these sides that come off the spine. And I think that's the perfect place to put another flap that will, I think I'm going to have it come down this way, fold this way, and it will contain a pocket for a journal to fit in. And we'll use the journal pages from the kit to construct that journal. Can also then do another flap on this side that will come down this way. And with that, we could put another pocket, and perhaps you have 2 journals. And the purpose of those journals could be for writing. They could be for further junk journaling and decorating. Another really good idea would be that you could take some photos, as I had discussed earlier, and put the photos on the journal pages so that you have just this really nice album full of autumn memories. So I'm going to get the pieces ready for the flaps that will fold up and come off the side and come down this way. And I'll give you the dimensions once I have them measured. So I cut the panels for the inside, and what I decided to do is I went with, I wanted each to be 5.5 inches so they come off. And, they come close to meeting. And so I cut it at 6.5 inches going wide, and then I kept it at the 11.5 in the length, and I did that for each. And then I scored at 1 inch on each side. I did go around the edges with the plastic knife to distress the edges. I went around with the ink. Now what I think I'm going to do is, I don't think I'm going to end up putting like a full sheet of paper onto the front and back of these like I have with some of these others. I think what I'm going to use here instead is I'm going to use some spray stain, distress spray stain. Go ahead and spray these just to get them inked up a bit. And then I will end up putting like a picture or something over, but it's not going to take up the whole space. But at least it'll help with getting some color on. So I'm now going to show you how I'll do that. Okay, so I have my card panels in the box I used for spraying these inks and stains. And what I'm going to do is just use a variety of some brown colors that I have. Some of them are from Brutus Monroe. There are these chroma mists. I'm also going to be using the distress sprays from Tim Holtz. And just going ahead and getting a nice coverage of color on these. And then I'm going to let them dry, and I'll do the other side. So I'll show you how they look. I'll show you once they're done, but for right now, I'll show you how I'm just kind of spritzing this on. And I just want to get a variety. It can be, doesn't have to be the whole, it could be parts. But just some nice sprays on there, and they're nice autumn colors. The other thing I also like to do is you can, one, do a quick mist with just a little bit of water. And then what I like to do to kind of, because I love the effect, is if you spray these types of stains with some rubbing alcohol. I keep it in a spray bottle like this. It helps model up those inks. And as they dry, they just kind of form neat patterns and spread a little bit more. So I have that side done for each of those. Now I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to do the other side. I am really happy with the way that these two pages turned out. Not really pages, more like, internal flaps that we'll be using inside. But look at the richness of the colors. I used some acorn and some cider from Brutus Monroe, and I used some bundled sage and some rusty hinge from Distress Inks from Tim Holtz. Did it on each side. Don't worry about these spines because those are going to be, attached down anyways. And then, the same thing on these sides too. And you can see the different effects. So I used a little bit more rubbing alcohol spray on the front, and you can see that mottled effect where it just gathers and it just helps saturate that area. And on the inside, I used some, but not as much. And what I did on the inside is to help speed up the drying, I actually used a heat tool, and you can see where it kind of blew that ink around a bit and kind of created those striations that you see. But these colors just go so well with the overall colors of the journal. I'm really impressed by them. I think what I will do is rub a little ink along these, since that will be the side that's attached down. When it's open, you will see that. So I am going to run just a little bit of ink on the inside there so that there's a little bit more coverage there. But overall, really happy with the way that these look, and we'll get them inserted into our album next. Okay, so I did run some ink and just darkened it up a little bit more and blended it in. I really like the way those look. So now I'm just going to get the double-sided tape onto the panel that I'm adhering down and get some glue, especially along those edges, to make sure there's a nice tight connection that we'll make. Don't worry if you get a little elsewhere. You can just use your finger and you can kind of wipe that off. There we go. So this one is done. And now what you can do is decide where on this side you would like that to reside. I want to give it as much space as possible on that inside spine piece to be able to accommodate if I wanted to add other things later. For example, another one of these, you could always expand if you needed more space and there's more than enough room to add another one, or you could add it up there. But I'm going to come down here and I'm going to open up these flaps so that I can align it along that edge of the spine and stick it down and just move it into place like that. That is exactly where I want it. Let's press that down. And as you can see, there's still more space to be able to add something there if you'd like to. But that fits in there perfectly. When we close that, you'll see that we'll just fold that. Oh, brought that down off the side, but that's okay, no damage done. Just fold that down to get that into place, and I'll give you a bird's eye view. You can see that it's going to be right there, and there's plenty of space to put whatever. You could also put a binding in there. That would be the perfect spot for like a binding, and then you could have the pages adhered to the binding too. That's something to think about, actually, that I could do on one side. I'm going to ponder that as I go ahead and get the panel in on the other side. So I got the other side in. Again, very happy with it. It looks great. And as I was doing that, I realized, hey, I never decided what I was going to do for the other part of keeping it closed. And so I realized I should have put the little brad and screw in before I put that paper down, but I didn't. But that's okay. It's not the end of the world because there's likely to be an image or something that's going to go over that anyways. So I went ahead and put that one in place. And then I just took some twine and I tied it down. That one's a little tighter around that side. Made it a little looser here so that way there is just something there to keep it closed. You may want to do that, you may not, but again, it just makes it look a little bit more rustic and a little bit more fall, in my opinion. So we now have both of those other flaps in, and the structure is just about there. And so my next decision is, do I want to try to fit in a binding over here that would have, like, you know, the edges that come up that would allow us to adhere some journal pages in. So I'm going to take a look at that now. So I have this die that I bought on Amazon that creates like the binding mechanism for you. It cuts out a section, but then it also adds in the score lines and the in case you wanted to like rip them apart, which I do because I only need 2 of them. You can also easily cut or tear those on those dotted perforated lines. So this would be pretty simple to be able to add a binding in. And I'm thinking that I may just go ahead and do that. Because then that way I could, instead of a pocket for the journal, I could just have the binding piece right in there. So I think I will go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do a couple of things. One is there's this gap here that's about a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to cut a 1/2 inch strip and put it on each side so that that's filled in. And then I'm going to decide about this binding. Okay, so I put those 1/2 inch strips in on each side and put a little ink over them just to blend them in a bit. And I also then did put some ink over the binding pieces. And getting these in there is going to be really simple. You want them to fit right on the spine. on that piece that folds in, and you want to make sure that they're not going to interfere with the folds. And we're just going to end up having the one signature on one side, another signature on another. And so I think I will wait and get those signatures done first, get the signature in there, and then adhere that down so that I know how much room I need on either side to, depending on the thickness of the signature. So we're going to put those to the side. Those will be coming up. And while we are finishing up on the inside, I had already gone ahead and cut some panels using the decal die of this really pretty paper that we can put in. And I think I'm going to want one. I don't know that I want to cover that up. I really like that. So I think I'm going to cover there and there and put those on the inside to kind of lighten it up because there is an awful lot of dark there. So I'm going to place those there. And I think that'll look really nice. So I'm going to get those adhered down. Okay, so I've actually changed my mind. No big surprise there. As I create live like this, sometimes I just change my mind and decide to do something different. So I'm actually going to scrap the idea of having anything bound in like that because what I thought about is I'm not quite sure I like the fact that it would be sticking up from here, be hard to write. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another sheet of the printed paper from the kit. I'm going to put some of the craft cardstock on the back, and I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to take a 1/2 inch and adhere one of these to this side coming in and one of these to this side coming in. So then that way I have printed my journal pages. I can make a holder, a pocket or something for the journal pages. And then I also printed out the butterfly cards, which are absolutely gorgeous, by the way. And so what I'm going to do with those is I'm going to make this into a little butterfly book that I can then make a pocket for the one that's sticking out this way to put it in. So that is what I have decided to do instead. So I'm going to get started with just getting the paper adhered and creating the little pockets that I need. Okay, so I have my 2 panels created with the printed paper on one side and the craft cardstock on the other, and I have used some ink to distress it a bit. And I did one that was actually at 6 inches to give me 5.5 to give me enough width for the to hold the journal. And I did the other one then at the remainder of 4. And that will be big enough to hold the butterfly book when I make it. So all I'm going to do now, and this should be the last insertions, is adhere down onto that 1/2 inch there. So it folds over, and the same thing over here so that it will meet not exactly in the middle, because I'm not going right up against that image, which I could do, but coming off of the other part of the binding, which I like a little bit better, just to give some room for things. So those are going to flap over like that. And I'm okay with that. I like that. If it's an issue for you, by all means, you can put them on the inside and, have them close down that way. But I want them there. So I'm going to get those adhered down. And then we will take a look at the journal. Okay, so I have those inserted there, and I actually think I want my journal over here instead. And so all I did is I cut out a 3 inch high by 5 1/4 inch wide piece of the patterned paper, and that fits perfectly right there. I think that's where I want it. So in order to allow for the journal size, I'm going to use some double-sided foam tape. And this is really easy. All I'm going to do is, you want to have a stopper down the bottom. So I'm going to move this up here so you can see it. We're going to put a stopper along the bottom. I'd like it to be a little bit straighter than that. There we go. And I want to make sure that there's enough room to fit the journal. So I'm going to put at least one more foam tape over, a piece of the double-sided foam tape over that. We may do a third, not sure yet. Let's see how this looks. Push it down really well. That is pretty good space, but yeah, I actually do think I want to go even a little bit more space than that. So I'm going to get a third. And let's get that on there. Just use your best judgment. After I get this third piece on, I will compare that to my journal, but I think that's going to be, I think the 3 is actually going to be exactly what I need. And the nice thing about having it here is once it's adhered down, there's space, which is nice. There's a good amount of space there. So I think the 3 is perfect. So there's 3 that way. Now we're going to want to do 3 coming up the side. So I'm going to do that and I will show you how I adhere it down. Okay, so I have my double-sided foam tape on there across each side and the bottom to act as a stopper for the journal, you know, to form that pocket. Now I am going to put a little bit of glue there just because, you know, we're building it up 3 high. The adhesive on the back of the foam, you know, may or may not be able to hold that, but the glue will certainly help with forming a bond on the paper that's there. So I'm just getting some glue on there. And now we'll get this pocket in place. And I like that it also has the backdrop of that really pretty flowered patterned paper versus this patterned paper, which, by the way, this patterned paper here also looks nice versus the one on the side of it. Let's get that pressed down. There we go. Perfect. And we're going to let that dry, but I can show you that the journal is going to fit in there perfectly. So that's a nice little home for that. I need to bind the journal. I also need to get the little butterfly book cut out and a pocket for that adhered down here as well, and decide where I want to put that. So those are the next steps that we have.